I want you to picture a very specific scenario for a second. You are lying awake at night,
Oh man, we've all been there.
right? And you can smell that incredibly crisp, like freshly washed bedding. You feel the cool, heavy weight of pristine white sheets. You are in a beautiful house, a place that by all accounts should feel like this absolute sanctuary.
Yeah, the picture perfect setup.
Exactly. And you are lying mere inches away from the person you love, yet as you stare up at the ceiling in the dark, listening to them breathe, you feel completely, utterly alone.
It's a haunting image. For so many people, that specific flavor of isolation is quite possibly the worst feeling in the world.
It really
It's
is.
that unshakable sensation of being entirely adrift when you are, theoretically anyway, right next to your safe harbor. I mean, the proximity almost makes the distance hurt more.
Yeah, exactly. The physical closeness amplifies the emotional chasm, and that's when the mind just starts spinning. You start hearing that familiar, like buzzing live wire of a voice asking, why can't you just be happy?
Right, the internal critic wakes up.
Oh, fully. It says, why are you struggling with this again? For you, the listener, someone who likely prides themselves on being highly efficient, on optimizing every other part of your life, from your career to your fitness to your finances, hitting this invisible wall in your relationship can feel like a totally baffling failure.
Which is, frankly, exactly why today's deep dive is going to resonate so deeply with that specific optimizing mindset.
Yes, I am so excited for this one.
Because we are looking at Anna Shilina's 2026 book, Relating Intelligence, Simple Math of Happy Relationships. And what Shilina has done is essentially, she's built a framework that strips away all the abstract poetry of romance, right? And she replaces it with tangible mechanics.
Okay, let's unpack this mission because we are diving straight into her exact equation today. She proposes that a successful relationship equals one decision plus three relationship ratios plus nervous system capacity.
It's just so practical.
It is. And our goal today is to examine the gears of that exact machine so that you can graduate from endlessly, like, quote unquote, healing past wounds to actively mastering human connection in the present.
I am thrilled to analyze this with you because this material represents a really profound paradigm shift.
Mm.
I mean, this isn't a hospital for broken people.
Right. No couches to lie on and cry about your childhood for 10 years.
Exactly. Shalina explicitly states that this is performance coaching for the human heart. It treats love not as a mysterious, lightning stroke of luck, but as an intelligence.
Yeah.
And like any form of intelligence, it can be trained, it can be measured, and it can be mastered.
But to even begin to understand this math, we really have to start by unlearning the terrible math that culture has fed us since we were, I don't know, old enough to watch a romantic comedy.
Oh, the rom-coms have ruined us.
They really have. We have to completely dismantle three massive myths about love before we can step into what Shilina calls the relationship gym. So, myth number one. Relationships are naturally hard, and if it's hard, it means you're bad at it, or something is fundamentally broken.
This is where we must immediately reframe the entire conversation. You are not broken, you are simply undertrained.
Undertrained. I love that word for this.
Right. Think about the physical body. Imagine walking into a gym, having literally never lifted weights in your life, and trying to deadlift 400 pounds on your very first day.
You would destroy your back.
Your form would completely collapse. It would be excruciatingly painful, and you would probably injure yourself severely. But you wouldn't walk out of the gym and declare, well, lifting weights is a scam, and my body is fundamentally flawed.
No, you'd just realize you need to start with the 10-pound dumbbells.
Exactly. You would logically recognize that you haven't built the muscle fiber. You haven't induced the necessary hypertrophy to lift the weight.
Yet, when it comes to intimacy, we expect ourselves to possess Olympic-level emotional strength just by virtue of, turning 25 or 30.
We really do.
We don't expect ourselves to speak fluent Mandarin without lessons, but we fully expect ourselves to be fluent in deep, nurturing vulnerability.
Precisely. I mean, if healthy relationship dynamics were never modeled for you as a child, you never picked up the baseline math. You lack the reps.
The reps, yes.
So the friction you feel isn't a sign of brokenness. It's just the burn of an untrained muscle being asked to perform a heavy lift.
Which leads directly into the second myth we have to dismantle.
So it takes two to tango myth.
Yes. This deeply ingrained cultural idea that you cannot fix a struggling relationship unless both people are sitting on a therapist's couch, equally committed to doing quote-unquote the work at the exact same time.
Which honestly feels paralyzing. If you are waiting on someone else to match your exact level of self-awareness, I mean, you might be waiting forever.
You'll be waiting decades in some cases.
Wow.
And this is where Shilina introduces performance coaching for the individual. Okay, break that down for us.
Yeah.
How does one person changing fix a two-person dynamic?
Well, consider the mechanics of dancing salsa.
Okay.
Have you ever danced with a world-class professional dancer or played tennis against a true pro?
Poorly, but yes.
But notice what happens. You don't even have to consciously try to be better. Suddenly, your rhythm improves. Your footwork sharpens. You naturally elevate to meet their frequency.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's true. You kind of get dragged up to their level.
Exactly. In neurobiology, we see this with mirror neurons. Our brains are literally wired to subconsciously mimic and synchronize with the state of the nervous system across from us.
So it's biological, not just behavioral.
100%. When one person changes how they show up in a dynamic, the entire equation of that relationship fundamentally shifts. You drag them into a new rhythm without them even consciously realizing it.
I have to push back on that for just a second, though.
Please do.
Let's think about our listener who might be in a genuinely toxic situation right now. Isn't it exhausting or even dangerous to put all the pressure on one person to fix a two-person dynamic? Like if someone is dealing with a partner who outright refuses to communicate, doesn't this run the risk of blaming the victim for not dancing well enough?
This raises an important question, and it is a crucial distinction to make. It highlights a major boundary in Shilina's work. She is absolutely clear that this framework is not an excuse to endure harm, abuse, or chronic manipulation.
Okay, good. That's a vital caveat.
If you are being controlled or abused, the answer isn't to look in the mirror, adjust your salsa steps, and ask what you're projecting. The answer is to enforce an ironclad boundary, which very often means finding the door.
Got it. Okay, that clarifies things. So this is really for the mundane fiction, the drift, the disconnection.
Exactly. Outside of abusive dynamics, in the realm of normal human gridlock, recognizing that you are the most powerful variable isn't about taking the blame. It's about reclaiming your agency.
I love that. Reclaiming agency.
It's stepping out of that helpless waiting game of, I will only be happy when they change. You are not responsible for their behavior, but you have absolute leverage over the ecosystem of the relationship simply by changing your own inputs.
Taking agency, which completely shatters the third myth, right? That love is just a mystery. We are sold this idea that love is inexplicable chemistry, a roll of the cosmic dice, and if you just find your soulmate, the spark will effortlessly sustain itself until you die.
It's a beautiful fairy tale, this idea that 1 + 1 equals a happily ever after 2. But biologically and psychologically, in a relationship, 1 + 1 creates a third entity.
A third entity, like a separate living thing.
Yes. The book actually likens a relationship to a business. Now, I know comparing love to a corporation sounds incredibly unromantic to some people.
But to the listener who optimizes their life, it makes perfect sense. You would never run a business without studying cash flow, market trends, or employee retention. You wouldn't launch a startup based on pure luck and like a good vibe in the room, hoping it survives the winter.
Exactly. Love is co-authored art. It requires structured daily inputs. Success in a relationship, just like in a business, is the compounding result of consistent microactions. It's not an atmospheric condition you simply exist in. It is an engine you have to actively fuel.
It's the difference between standing in a field waiting for lightning to strike and actually building a generator to produce your own electricity.
That is a fantastic way to put it.
So we've cleared away the bad math. We're standing in the relationship, Jim. We recognize we have the agency to change the dynamic. What is the very first exercise on the workout plan? Because according to Shilina's equation, it all starts with establishing the foundation, the one decision. And the twist here is that the decision is not choosing the right person.
That is the pivotal shift.
Yeah.
The one decision is choosing who you want to be. The mantra the author uses is to meet the one, become the one.
To meet the one, become the one.
And crucially, to stay connected with the one over decades, you have to continually keep becoming the one.
But what actually stops us from being the one? I mean, nobody wakes up on a Tuesday and decides to be a difficult, disconnected partner. The author introduces this battle between the conditioned self and the core self.
This is where we get into the developmental psychology of it all. Our identity, the personality we present to the world, is frequently just a performance we've curated to survive our specific childhood environment.
It's a survival strategy.
It is a childhood survival strategy that we have unknowingly dragged into adulthood. In our formative years, if expressing a need resulted in rejection, our brain formed a trauma loop or a shame loop to ensure we stayed attached to our caregivers.
Because as kids, attachment equals survival.
Precisely. So we built armor. The tragic irony of adulthood is that the very armor that kept you safe in childhood is now the exact thing blocking you from the deep intimacy you crave today.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I was thinking about this. It's like we're wearing a heavy, bulletproof winter coat indoors.
Oh, I like that visual.
Right. It absolutely saved us in the blizzard of childhood. It kept us alive when the emotional climate was freezing and unpredictable. But now we're adults. We are sitting at a beautifully set dinner table with a partner who loves us, sweating profusely, totally uncomfortable, and wondering why we can't feel the warmth of the fireplace right in front of us. But we are terrified to take the coat off because our brain still thinks we're in a blizzard.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. That heavy coat is the conditioned self, and we will fiercely defend our right to wear it. The book offers some poignant case studies that illustrate how this armor manifests differently for everyone.
Like Adam.
Take the case of Adam, yes. His armor was achievement. He receives an email confirming a massive, game-changing contract for his business. He's sitting in his car, he reads the email, and he feels absolutely nothing. Just a hollow numbness.
Right, because he learned early on, through a highly critical stepfather, that every win just moved the goalpost. He was on a perpetual dopamine treadmill of achievement. He had a master's degree in succeeding, but a kindergarten education in intimacy.
A kindergarten education and intimacy. That's exactly it. He literally didn't have the neural pathways to receive love or feel the joy of a win without feeling the immediate panic of having to earn the next one.
That sounds exhausting. And then there's Steve.
Or consider Steve, exactly. His armor was entirely different. It was being the provider. He hid behind being useful, reliable, and financially indispensable to everyone in his life. But emotionally, he was a ghost across the dinner table.
He was the guy who said he was restructuring his business, right?
Yes. He actually told the author that he was currently restructuring his business so that one day, when a baby arrived, he could finally practice being a present father.
Which is wild.
And the coaching response he received was a brilliant wake-up call. The coach told him, fatherhood is a practice you start now, not a role you look forward to. Steve was using his instrumental value, his ability to provide, as his winter coat, completely delaying the vulnerability of bringing his intrinsic value to the relationship.
Wow. And the author, Anna, shares her own incredibly vulnerable story about her armor, too. She used alcohol and emotional eating to numb this, like, cosmic loneliness that stemmed from being an immigrant child who felt deeply rejected on the playground.
Her honesty there is so striking.
It is. And what fascinated me was that her identity shift didn't happen through some grand, dramatic public declaration. It started with keeping one private promise to herself, just not drinking for one single night.
And the mechanism behind why that works is vital for our listener to understand. When she had those secret sips of wine, she wasn't just consuming calories. She was actively teaching her nervous system that her own word was worthless.
Self-betrayal.
Exactly. Bad habits are rarely the root problem. They are symptoms of self-betrayal driven by that childhood shame loop. The subconscious script says, I am bad, so you execute behaviors that confirm the script. To rewrite it, you don't need more willpower.
Which is what everyone thinks they need, just more discipline.
But willpower is a finite cognitive resource that always depletes under stress. You need corrective experiences. You have to prove to your nervous system through tiny kept promises that you can drop the armor and still survive.
Because, as Shilina points out, relationships act as massive mirrors. If we don't recognize our own conditioned patterns, we just end up getting intensely triggered by our partner. They inadvertently show us the parts of ourselves we've rejected or buried.
The mirror effect explains so much of our daily conflict. The book details a moment where Anna has a complete, dramatic meltdown, tears, raised voice, storming out of the room.
Oh, the kitchen story.
The trigger. Yeah. Her boyfriend simply asked her to just clean around me while he was working at the kitchen table. It was a wildly disproportionate reaction to a very mundane, logistical request at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday.
To an outside observer, he wasn't doing anything abusive. But her childline, her conditioned self, linked the act of cleaning around someone to a deep historical feeling of being profoundly disrespected and unseen.
And that disproportionate reaction, that amygdala hijack, is the absolute biological proof that the armor is running the show, not the wise, core self. Her boyfriend wasn't the enemy. He was just a mirror reflecting an unresolved loop. When you make the one decision to become the one, you are actively committing to noticing those somatic triggers and choosing to respond from your core self rather than reacting from your childhood conditioning.
Okay, let's transition into the mechanics of how we actually do that. We've made the decision, we recognize the winter coat, we are committed to taking it off. But what does that look like on a Tuesday night when you're exhausted? How do we stop this from just being a theoretical psychological exercise?
This brings us to the actual math. Relationships are ratios plus capacity.
So let's examine the first of the three ratios, which is designed to create that safe foundation, the container ratio.
The container ratio is fundamentally about managing the inputs to engineer a safe harbor. It has three specific subdials you have to actively monitor and adjust. The first dial is core versus conditioned self.
Which we just touched on.
All right, we just explored the theory of what those are, but in practice, it's about evaluating which ears you are listening with. Do you have triggered ears that interpret every piece of neutral feedback as a personal attack? Or do you have listening ears that belong to an untriggerable core self?
Untriggerable. That sounds like a superpower.
It is. Furthermore, it's about speaking to the core self of your partner, addressing the best, most capable version of them, even when their conditioned self is currently throwing a tantrum.
Believing in people is a superpower. I love that line from the text. And to help the reader understand this gap between our two selves, the author brings in the Luminous Spark personality assessment.
Yes, a fantastic tool.
For those who aren't familiar, it's built on the big five personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. But what makes it unique is that it measures how you show up when you are completely relaxed versus how you contort yourself when you're under intense pressure.
And the science behind that shift is fascinating. The gap between your relaxed baseline and your stressed persona is the precise measurement of your conditioned self taking over.
So it actually quantifies the winter coat.
Exactly. When cortisol floods your system, your traits warp. For instance, if you are naturally highly conscientious and outcome-focused when relaxed under stress, that same trait might warp into being rigidly controlling and micromanaging.
Well, I know a few people like that.
Or, if you are naturally agreeable, stress might turn you into a resentful people-pleaser. Making that invisible mathematical gap visible allows you to stop judging yourself for your stress behavior and start actively training it.
That moves us to the second dial in the container ratio, structure versus flow. The book uses a great visual for this, calling it the river in the riverbed or the string and the helium balloon.
This is a highly practical way to look at the dynamics of polarity without getting bogged down in traditional rigid gender scripts. Structure is the string. It is grounded, safe, analytical, and reliable. Flow is the balloon. It is colorful, emotional, bouncy, and unpredictable.
So you need both.
If you don't have the string, the balloon just floats away into absolute chaos. If you don't have the balloon, you're just a sad string lying on the ground.
We all know relationships that are just two strings lying on the ground. It's a purely administrative partnership, like, did you pay the electric bill? Did you walk the dog? Okay, good night.
Exactly. The required practice here is situational shape-shifting. Think about the optimizer who brings pure, rigid structure to their high-stress corporate job all week. If they bring that exact same structured energy to a Friday night date, evaluating the dinner like a quarterly performance review, the relationship gets incredibly suffocating.
You can't KPI a romantic dinner.
No, you can't. You have to know how to consciously drop the string and inject flow, playfulness, and unpredictability to keep the dynamic breathing.
Which bridges perfectly into the third dial of the container ratio, cute versus sexy. For the listener who feels like their romantic partnership has slowly devolved into a very pleasant roommate situation, this mathematically isolates the problem.
It truly does. If you are deeply entrenched in the friend zone, or if your marriage feels completely devoid of a spark, it's not necessarily a death sentence for the relationship. You likely just have a massive imbalance on this dial. Way too much cute and almost zero sexy.
Break those two down for us.
Cute is safe. It is familiar, comfortable, and maternal or paternal. Sexy is the opposite. It is the unknown. It is slightly dangerous, highly independent, and deeply desired.
There's that fascinating example in the text of Julia. She was a woman about to turn 40, desperately wanting a family, but she had been chronically single for a decade. The author looks at Julia's dating profile and immediately diagnoses the ratio imbalance.
Right. Julia had an entire profile of overtly sexy, highly provocative photos. She was wildly successful at attracting men who wanted access and chemistry, but she was never chosen for devotion.
Why is that?
From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, if every signal you send screams sexy and dangerous, you are exciting. But you are not signaling that you can be a reliable, safe harbor for raising a family. You need the ratio. You must be cute and friendly enough to be trusted, but sexy and autonomous enough to be ached for.
And the exact reverse is true for people trapped in long-term relationship stagnation. If you have become 100% comfort-like, the reliable best friend who wears sweatpants every night, you have to intentionally cultivate the unknown again. Dress up for no reason. Cultivate an unexpected, controversial opinion. Flirt with them like you haven't already won them.
You have to reintroduce risk.
Exactly. So the container ratio builds the safe harbor. But as any sailor knows, a safe harbor gets stagnant and toxic if you never leave it. That necessitates the second relationship ratio, the curiosity ratio. This is the engine of forward momentum.
The curiosity ratio is what prevents the relationship from flatlining over the span of decades. Its first dial is admiration versus taking for granted. People often lament, where did the affection go? The biological truth is that affection requires admiration as a prerequisite.
You can't just mandate affection.
Right. When you genuinely admire a trait in someone, your brain produces dopamine that naturally moves you toward them physically and emotionally.
But human beings have this fatal built-in flaw. We normalize magic. We completely normalize the incredible, complex person sleeping right next to us.
What's fascinating here is that it's a phenomenon called habituation. It is our brain's evolutionary superpower for survival, filtering out constant stimuli so we can focus on new threats. But it is our absolute Achilles heel in love. We stop seeing what is always there.
It just becomes background noise.
Yes. The only antidote to neural habituation is intentional, vocalized appreciation, because what you appreciate literally appreciates in value within your own mind.
The second dial here is mystery versus familiarity. And this leans heavily on the foundational work of relationship psychotherapist Esther Perel.
The Esther Perel paradox is essential here. The paradox states that love wants to know everything. It wants to close the gap, to merge, to feel completely safe. But desire needs distance. Desire requires a gap to cross.
Why is that, neurologically speaking? Why does distance create desire?
Because desire is fueled by dopamine. And dopamine is the molecule of more. It is a molecule of the unknown, of anticipation. You cannot crave what you already fully possess.
That makes so much sense.
If you assume you know exactly what your partner is going to say before they even open their mouth, you have effectively stopped truly seeing them. You've replaced the living, breathing human with a static mental avatar. And nobody stays passionately in love with an avatar. You need enough familiarity to feel secure, but enough mystery to trigger that dopamine anticipation.
Let's apply this to the listener who loves optimization, because I see a massive trap here. In modern culture, we have Life 360 tracking each other's locations. We have perfectly synced Google Calendar, so we know exactly what our partner is doing at 2:15 p.m. We have shared Notion boards for household chores. Is this hyper-transparency and optimization actively destroying the mystery dial?
That is a brilliant sociological observation.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Over-optimizing the logistics of your shared life can flatline the eroticism of a relationship. If there is no space between you physically or digitally, there is nothing to bridge. There is no polarity.
You've solved the puzzle entirely.
Exactly. You've engineered all the uncertainty out of the system, and in doing so, you've engineered out the desire. Which brings us perfectly to the third dial of curiosity. Me versus we.
Orbit, do not merge. That framing really struck me.
In the honeymoon phase, the we is effortless, intoxicating, and biologically driven by oxytocin. You want to merge completely. But a sustainable, healthy relationship requires two distinct whole individuals.
Like the story of Sam.
The book gives a great illustration of Sam sitting alone in his gym parking lot. He's about to text his partner to come join him the next morning. But he pauses. He realizes they live together, they work from home together, they eat every single meal together.
That's a lot of we.
It's too much we. He consciously decides he needs his own space, his me time, so that he actually has fresh experiences and energy to bring back to the we.
Yeah.
Individuation fuels connection.
I love that. So we have the safe container and we have the forward momentum of curiosity. But let's be real here. Even if you have mystery and admiration, you are eventually going to step on each other's toes. The bloom pops, real life hits.
Inevitably.
What happens when there is actual heated friction? That is governed by the third and final ratio, the challenge ratio. This dictates whether a disagreement breaks you apart or actually increases your intimacy.
The challenge ratio is where the theoretical framework meets the harsh reality of human nature. The first dial is fun versus feedback. Humans, like all mammals, learn through play. Play generates endorphins and oxytocin, which act as a neurological buffer.
A buffer against stress.
Yes. If your relationship has massive amounts of fun, You have a thick buffer, and you can easily digest tiny amounts of constructive feedback. But if the fun has evaporated, that buffer is gone.
Hmm.
Even the smallest, most gently delivered suggestion feels like a devastating, cortisol-spiking criticism.
The book introduces Leo here, 14 years into a marriage, and he describes his wife to the author as a fault-finding machine. Just endless late-night dissections of everything he did wrong that day.
And his physiological response was to retreat, go entirely quiet, and withdraw his affection exactly like a punished child sent to his room.
And notice the intervention they used. The solution wasn't a grueling 6-hour couples therapy session to unpack a decade of resentment. It was a date night with one strict, non-negotiable rule: zero feedback allowed.
Pure, unadulterated play.
Right. They had to chemically shift the ratio of positive to negative interactions before Leo's nervous system could feel safe enough to actually communicate again.
So practical. The next dial is play versus pressure. Pressure is an unavoidable feature of adult life: mortgages, health scares, aging parents. But if you don't intentionally schedule celebration and play, the prefrontal cortex just gets overloaded by the pressure and the dynamic is crushed.
Then you have challenge versus comfort, which is about avoiding both burnout from too much stress and the agonizing boredom of total complacency.
True. But the most critical dial in this entire section, and perhaps the most important skill in long-term relating, is rupture versus repair. A relationship without conflict is an absolute fantasy or a sign of deep, unhealthy suppression.
But a relationship without genuine, effective repair is a ticking time bomb of unhealed resentments.
Shilina says needs are non-negotiable. We all have them. But how we address those unmet needs changes everything. She outlines a huge difference between confrontation, which is me versus you, fighting over who is right, and approach, which is you and me sitting on the same side of the table, facing the problem together.
If we look at the biology of trust, repair is actually where the deepest bonds are forged.
Yes, the vagus nerve, which controls our parasympathetic nervous system, is stimulated during successful repair. It's the lived bodily experience of saying, we can mess up, we can scream, we can rupture, and we can still safely come home to each other. But true repair requires extreme ownership. You have to own your part of the mess without adding a defensive butt.
Right. I'm sorry I raised my voice, but you were nagging me. That but instantly kills the repair. It invalidates the apology entirely.
Exactly. It reactivates the partner's defense mechanisms. And the final dial of the challenge ratio is infatuation versus disappointment. This is going to be a tough pill to swallow for the romantic idealists listening.
Oh boy.
Disappointment is a guaranteed feature of a long-term relationship. It is not a bug.
I thought the Shrek analogy used here was brilliant. In the beginning of the movie, you think you're rescuing the perfect, pristine princess, or you think you've found the handsome, flawless prince. Then the infatuation wears off, the sun goes down, and they turn into the ogre.
And you realize who they really are.
But the actual love story, the profound part, is falling in love with the real deal ogre, not the fantasy projection you originally pasted over them.
Dr. Helen Fisher's extensive neurobiological research on the brain and love backs this up perfectly. The dopamine and norepinephrine-drenched infatuation phase, the honeymoon phase, is literally designed by evolution to be temporary.
It has a built-in expiration date.
It has to. If we stayed in that state of obsessive, manic focus forever, we would never go to work, we wouldn't eat, and society would collapse. It is designed to bind two people together long enough to start a family, and then it's supposed to fade into a calmer, oxytocin-driven attachment. When the intense high phase doesn't mean you chose the wrong person, it means your biology is functioning exactly as it was built to.
This completely reframes serial monogamists. People who constantly hop from one 2-year relationship to the next, they think they are just hopeless romantics chasing the high of a spark.
But what they're actually doing is escaping the terrifying vulnerability of being truly known. The moment the chemical high wears off and the real, flawed, messy human underneath is exposed, and more importantly, the moment their own flaws are exposed, they run.
They bail.
They choose the familiar, controllable hell of leaving over the unfamiliar, risky heaven of being truly seen and loved, ogre and all.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and survey where we are. We've built the gym. We understand the math intimately. The one decision to drop the armor, the container to build safety, the curiosity to drive momentum, and the challenge to manage friction.
It's a comprehensive system.
On paper, intellectually, this is brilliant. But, and this is the massive roadblock for almost everyone, what happens when you are in the heat of a screaming match in the kitchen? Your prefrontal cortex might intellectually know the math, but your amygdala is in full panic mode. The math is completely useless without the muscle. And that brings us to the final, foundational piece of the equation, nervous system capacity.
This is where the entire framework either succeeds or catastrophically fails. Knowing the right vocabulary words is not the same as being a human who embodies them. You cannot out-willpower a triggered nervous system.
The story of James and his son perfectly encapsulates this failure of willpower. James spent 5 years and thousands of dollars in cognitive behavioral therapy. He had the perfect therapist-approved script to speak calmly and set boundaries with his son. He knew exactly what he was supposed to say.
And yet, the moment his son's requests came in loud, fast, and demanding, James lost his cool and started yelling. Why? Because the HPA axis in his brain, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands, was interpreting the volume and the pressure of his son's voice as a literal physical threat.
His brain thought he was under attack.
Subconsciously, the noise was proof that he was failing as a father, which triggered a survival response. The polite script was coming from his mouth, but his body was bracing for a tiger attack. No logical script survives a nervous system that subconsciously feels it is fighting for its life.
The math is totally useless without the physical capacity to pause. So how do we actually train this capacity? The author focuses on neuroplasticity, our brain's incredible ability to rewire its responses through repeated exposure. She provides 8 specific drills, and I want to dive deep into a few that will really resonate with the listener trying to optimize their emotional regulation. The first is titrated discomfort.
Titrated discomfort relies on a biological concept called hormesis, the idea that a low dose of a stressor is actually beneficial and builds resilience. The trigger itself is the medicine, provided the dose is right.
Like exposure therapy.
Exactly. You don't build emotional capacity by reading books about it in a quiet room. You build it by meeting discomfort in real time and staying just one breath more present than you did the last time. It teaches the body, yes, my heart rate is elevated, yes, I am uncomfortable, but I am not actually going to die.
Then there is intentional nothingness. For anyone who absolutely hates the patronizing advice, just take a deep breath when they are furious. This technique is absolute gold.
It is the long exhale technique, often referred to in neurobiology as a physiological sigh. When you are triggered, you're usually chest breathing, which signals panic to the brain. Instead of trying to force a deep breath in, which feels impossible when you're tense, you push all the air out.
Just empty it all.
Empty your lungs completely, draw your navel tight to your spine, and just hold that emptiness for a second. Your body will naturally, reflexively, take a deep, diaphragmatic breath in on its own.
Why does that specific breathing pattern work so quickly?
Because it directly stimulates the vagus nerve, which runs from your brainstem down through your abdomen. A long exhale forcefully applies the brakes to your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. It's a physical reset button that forces a moment of stillness, widening the gap between stimulus and response.
And finally, the drill that's going to be incredibly validating for our optimization-focused listener, body-mind.
We simply cannot separate the psychology of the mind from the physiology of the body. The text highlights 3 physiological levers that dictate our emotional bandwidth: the gut microbiome, sleep architecture, and fascia. Let's look at the gut, often called the second brain or the enteric nervous system. Up to 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter responsible for mood regulation, is produced in the gut, not the brain.
So if you have a poor diet of ultra-processed foods, or you're drinking heavily, or you're sleep-deprived, you are creating massive inflammation.
Exactly. That inflammation travels up the vagus nerve highway straight to the brain. That low-grade physiological stress keeps your amygdala quietly hypervigilant, braced for an attack all day long.
So what does this all mean? It means you literally cannot build a successful patient relationship on a foundation of an inflamed gut and a chronically depleted nervous system. Trying to execute the approach over confrontation math during an argument when your gut is inflamed is like trying to meditate next to a blaring car alarm. Sometimes the absolute best relationship therapy you can do is to stop talking, go to sleep early, and fix your diet.
It is profoundly true. You have to lower the baseline inflammation. The text also brings up fascia, the web of connective tissue holding our muscular system together. Trauma and emotional armoring often manifest as chronic physical tension stored in the fascia. When you physically release that tension through somatic practices, stretching, or deep tissue work, the mind often follows. The body lets go of the physical armor, making it easier to let go of the emotional armor.
We have the math of the ratios. We have the muscle of the nervous system. Now we arrive at integration. How does the listener apply this exactly 10 minutes after this deep dive ends? Because consuming information is useless without integration.
The author provides a really elegant tool for this.
Yes, Shilina gives us a 4-question framework to use tonight when friction arises. Question 1, what am I noticing?
And the specific order of operations here is vital. It must be. Sensation, then emotion, then the story. First, what is happening in the body? You notice your jaw is tight, your chest feels hot. Second, you name the core emotion. Beneath the sensation, anger, sadness, fear. Then, and only then, do you look at the narrative story you are telling yourself, such as my partner doesn't respect my time.
Why is it so crucial that the story comes last? Because my instinct is always to lead with the story of why I'm mad.
Because under the pressure of a trigger, the human brain, specifically the left hemisphere's interpreter module, is the least reliable narrator in the room. Its entire job is to invent a coherent story to explain your physiological arousal. If you lead with the story, you will almost certainly react to a paranoid fiction that your triggered mind just fabricated to protect you.
That is wildly illuminating. Question 2, what would I prefer?
This forces a psychological shift. It moves you from being a critic who only knows what they hate and what's wrong to being a creator who takes responsibility for articulating exactly what they actually want to happen.
Question 3. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this now?
This is a triage mechanism for the brain. It stops you from fighting level 2 logistical issues, like a pair of shoes left in the hallway, as if they are level 9 existential threats of deep disrespect.
And question 4. What am I doing about it now? Not what am I going to do tomorrow, but what action am I taking right this second? Let's run Anna's kitchen meltdown story through this exact framework to see it in action. First, what is she noticing? Sensation, a tight jaw and a racing heart. Emotion, deep hurt and rejection. Story, I am being treated like a maid, I am being disrespected. Second, preference, I want to feel like we are an equal team. Third, scale, the actual kitchen mess is a 2, but feeling respected is a 9. Finally, action. Instead of throwing a tantrum and storming out, which is what her conditioned self wants to do, her core self stays in the room and calmly asks for help cleaning, separating the level 2 mess from the level 9 need.
That is the rep. That is exactly how you lift the weight in the relationship, Jim. You interrupt the automatic loop, process the physiology, and choose a new response.
This has been an incredibly dense, transformative journey. For you listening, this is the ultimate hack you've been looking for. You do not need endless years of excavating your childhood past on a couch to see change. You need to understand the math today, implement the ratios tonight, and actively build the physical capacity in your nervous system to stay in the room when every ancient instinct in your body is screaming at you to run.
And as we move further into a world completely dominated by algorithms, this human skill set becomes even more critical. The book touches briefly on the intersection of intimacy and artificial intelligence. You absolutely can use AI as a tool, feed an argument into a prompt, and ask it to objectively translate your partner's perspective so you can understand it better. It's fantastic for removing bias. But you can never, ever outsource the actual intimacy. No algorithm can physically co-regulate your nervous system. The messy conversation, the eye contact, the physical repair, that biological reality belongs entirely to you.
The more intelligent and seamless our technology becomes, the more intentional and intelligent our human relating must become to survive it. We have covered so much ground today, dissecting the math and the muscle of love. But I want to leave you, our listener, with one final, slightly provocative thread to pull on. The author asserts that relationships are ultimately mirrors, and the profound beauty we are able to see in our partner is just a reflection of the beauty already existing within us. But if that premise holds true, it raises a haunting question. When you feel chronically disconnected, when you are staring at that ceiling in the dark, constantly dissatisfied with the people you are dating or the partner you are currently with, what specific, vulnerable part of your own core self are you still refusing to invite to the table? If the mirror is looking a bit dull, maybe it's time to ask who is really doing the looking.